Roles and responsibilities of a teacher. In every profession, there are roles and responsibilities and boundaries that are set in order to divide the line that indicates the parties' limit. Roles and responsibilities are important because they would facilitate order in any given organization and allow personal and organizational objectives to be met. As those with roles will be accountable to their functions, actions and responsibilities assigned to or required or expected of a person or group are referred to as roles, while the obligations to carry forward an assigned task to a successful conclusion are referred to as responsibilities. All learning institutions are subject to legislation. It is of relevance that in this assignment, I link these roles and responsibilities to current legislative requirements such as Disability Discrimination Act, Special Education Needs, and Equal Opportunities. Under the Professional Code of Practice, I have responsibilities as a teacher to undertake 30 hours of continued professional development per year, and I must also update my subject knowledge. I must therefore have clarity on my roles and responsibilities in order to prevent omission of duty. In this assignment, I will examine the roles and responsibilities of a teacher in relation to the teaching training cycle. This will be lead to focusing on professional activities within the learning cycle. I will also recognize the professional boundaries that governs a teacher's behavior in order to comply with the professional code of conduct. It is therefore of significance that I discuss where the teacher's different roles stop. After analyzing this topic, I will come up with a conclusion. Holthrop suggests that obviously teachers wear many hats: friend, counselor, judge, mentors, hundreds of roles, and different roles for different classes, students, and extracurricular duties. In relation to the training cycle, I have a role of assessor. A majority of learners will have different individual learning needs, and for me to accommodate their needs, I need to have assessment skills that will promote equality, diversity, and inclusion. I will link this to Domain A of the LLUK standards, which states one of the professional practices as apply principles to evaluate and develop own practice in promoting equality and inclusive learning and engaging with diversity. I can achieve this by carrying out through initial assessments that will help me to identify different learner needs such as poor writing skills, poor reading skills, and disabilities. This will be in line with Domain C, ways to identify individual learning needs and potential barriers to learning in own specialist area. This will make it easier for both the learner and me to access learning and deliver learning respectively. because based on the assessment's needs that I will identify, I must have knowledge, understanding of how I will apply the different assessment methods like formative and summative assessment to meet these needs. This might increase the level of motivation to both the learner and teacher. I will link this to Domain E, which is about assessment for learning, theories and principles of assessment, and the application of different forms of assessment, including initial, formative, and summative assessment in teaching and learning. In my role as a teacher, I am to conduct initial assessments which will help me to identify learners' needs, knowledge, and skills, and also help me to identify referral points against levels within the national standards. When I identify needs that need to be referred, I will have to give the learners information, advice, and guidance to where they are being referred. This will be linked to Domain F, which is about access and progression, source of information, advice, guidance, and support to which learners might be referred. White explains that assessing varying learning styles within a group and considering learners' motivation and previous experiences helps identify various teaching methods that could be useful throughout the program. Sessions incorporating visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning styles ensure students have equal rights to learning and provide the opportunity to re-evaluate what is already known while exploring aims and objectives from a different perspective. The initial assessment will provide me with some important detail to inform the plan, which will be revised on an ongoing basis to monitor the learner's progress and identify any subsequent support needs. Both learner and teacher will be aware of what the learner knows and is able to do and what he or she needs to learn. It is important for me and the learner to know how the learner likes to learn, as this helps me to identify barriers to learning such as difficulties in reading, writing, numeric, language skills, and any other disabilities, and will make reasonable adjustments in order to use the appropriate assessment methods that will meet the individual learner's need and promote equality and diversity. At this stage, should any learner require support which is beyond my competence, I will prepare and ensure that I give the learner the right information on their referral so as to meet the professional standards in Domain F of the LLUK, source of information, advice, guidance, and supports to which learners might be referred. This is in line with the Equal Opportunities Act, which states that all learners must have equal access to learning regardless of their learning barriers, disabilities, sex, religion, and race. Under the Disability Discrimination Act of 1995, disabled learners must not be treated less favorably and teachers must make reasonable adjustments to ensure that disabled learners are not at a substantial disadvantage compared to their peers. Following the initial assessment, I should do a diagnostic assessment in order to identify specific individual needs and support required, and this will be lead to the creation of a detailed personal profile providing the basis for an individual learning plan. As an assessor, I have limit to this role. By doing true assessment, I may identify needs that are beyond my competence and may need to refer the learner appropriately. For example, if I identify that a learner has financial needs, I may need to refer the said learner to the appropriate department. This is itself in helping meet the learner's need and adhering the professional boundaries. It will be very unprofessional for a teacher to give money to a learner to fund his or her education or get money from a learner. This is to comport to the LLUK standards in Domain A, which states that comport to statutory requirements and apply codes of practice, and also Domain F, which says boundaries of own role in supporting learners, and one of the professional code of practice introduced by the Institute of Learning or IFL states that a teacher must protect the interests of the learners and the wider public, and any member of the institute or learning who breaches the code will be subject to disciplinary investigation as described by the disciplinary procedure. Let me look at another role of a teacher. As a teacher, I am a planner. In that, I plan appropriate, effective, coherent, and inclusive learning programs that promote equality and engage with diversity. This means I should plan for the use of different teaching methods and activities which are in line with the curriculum requirements and meet the needs of the learners. This is in line with the LLUK standards Domain B and D. Principles of learning and ways to provide learning activities to meet curriculum requirements and the needs of all learners. How to plan appropriate, effective, and coherent and inclusive learning programs that promote equality and engage with diversity. Planning is a very important role for me because it will direct or guide me in the delivery session. My planning will depend on the identified individual needs, which will prompt me to use the appropriate teaching methods. This is because I am required to ensure that the identified needs of my learners are properly taken care of in my planning process. Without planning, I may not be able to meet the learner's need and may not deliver in line with the curriculum. This may result in demotivation and dissatisfaction to both learner and I, as learners will feel they have not been catered for, and I will feel I have not played my role as a planner. In view of the ongoing assessments, I am responsible for preparing the assessments in such a way that they meet the needs of individual learners and promote equality, diversity, and inclusion. In this case, it is important for me to use different assessment methods such as formative and summative assessments. This could be direct observation, oral questioning, professional discussion, witness testimony of case studies. When this is done, I will have met the LLUK standard Domain E, theories and principles of assessment and the application of different forms of assessment, including initial, formative, and summative in teaching and learning. It is part of my responsibility to ensure that learners are involved in planning for assessments. Learners should not be subjected to a surprise assessment. I should always involve them at the planning stage and be able to give them opportunities to make their own suggestions and choices without putting them in situations where they feel overwhelmed. This will give them a sense of ownership. This is in line with LLUK standard Domain E, ensures that learners understand and involve and share in responsibility for assessment of their learning. The planning session should be able to meet the individual learner needs by considering different resources that will promote fair and effective assessment. For example, a teacher who is going to assessor a learner at a place or work must have planned in advance with the learner, who might have suggested that it was better to do the assessment in the morning because that is when a lot of activities take place. If this happens, it is most likely that the learner will feel at ease and have a sense of fulfillment because he or she has been involved in the planning process and his or her need met. It is linked to Domain E. Apply appropriate methods of assessment fairly and effectively. A teacher is also an information provider. In reference to the teaching-learning cycle, this role requires me to implement teaching as planned and designed inclusively to promote equality and diversity. Gay states that it is very important for teachers to appreciate the impact culture has on learning. Furthermore, they must make their teaching well suited to the social, cultural context and frames of reference of ethnically diverse students. I must therefore take the differentiation approach to be able to offer a range of approaches and resources to meet the needs of an individual or a group of learners. It is my responsibility to develop and produce teaching and learning materials appropriate for a range of contexts, purposes, and target audience. Different learners have different level of understanding and knowledge, and if I am to cater for their needs, I will have to use different teaching tools such as DVDs, handouts, and practical demonstrations, which must be referenced to the curriculum. When applied, these teaching tools will promote equality, diversity, and inclusion, and will have the potential for language, literacy, numeracy, and information and communication technology for learners, and will make it easier for those who understand visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning. For example, a learner who understands well when they see might need to watch the video to get understanding. This can be linked to Domain B of LLUK standards, ways to ensure that resources used are inclusive, promote equality and support. This can also be linked to Bloom's taxonomy, where he separates out learning into three domains. Cognitive domain concerns our thinking and memory and our capacity for understanding. The psychomotor domain deals with our abilities, the skills that we have, what we can physically do. Affective domains relates to our understanding, our approach, our attitude to what we do. I am also responsible for making the learning environment a safe place to comply with the Health and Safety at Work Act. This calls for risk assessments which help to identify any hazards that would hinder learning. According to Maslow's pyramid, everyone needs to feel protected against any life-threatening cause. This is also in accordance with the LLUK Standards Domain B, which states that ways to maintain a learning environment in which learners feel safe and supported. It is therefore important for me to maintain safety in the learning environment and to make learners be aware of their responsibilities in maintaining safety, as health and safety is everyone's responsibility. As a teacher, I have the role of a mentor, counselor in delivering the course. I should be able to apply appropriate teaching and learning strategies which take account of individual learner needs. When delivering the course, I must show understanding of the responsibilities and boundaries of my own role in providing support for individual learners. For example, signposting and referring on special services. Learners should be given information on where they can find further information, advice, guidance, or learning provision. I also need to ensure that learners understand the context. For example, the NBQ standards, its application and contribution to the care sector, the economy, and the community. It is therefore important for me to attend standardization meetings in order to keep abreast with current standards in my specialist area. As required by the LLUK Standards Domain C, own specialist area including current developments, and Domain C, ways in which own specialist relates to the wider social, economic, and environmental context. Grabels asserts that learners learn from each other as well as the tutor. To promote diversity in my delivery, I must ensure that there is involvement of all students in relevant activities, rather than excluding them for any direct or indirect reasons, as mentioned in the Tomlinson report. Teachers must facilitate learning environments which will promote culture and ethnic diversity. Therefore, learners from different ethnic groups will be able to voice their cultural expression in order to increase content in the learning process. The assessment of learners' competence is an important role of a teacher. I will assess what the learner has learned and will be responsible for finding out what methods of teaching and learning will be most appropriate for the learner and to motivate the learner to continue and do better. This can be achieved by using formative and summative assessments in relation to my area of teaching. NBQs in health and social care. Formative assessment is aimed to helping the learner become competent and met special performance criteria. This should be an ongoing process where regular tutorial sessions take place. Teacher following workplace observation and completing of written tasks. I am responsible for giving learners constructive feedbacks on their performance, which will motivate them, especially those that are unsure of their own abilities. This can be linked to Domain E, the role of feedback and questioning in assessment for learning. I am also responsible for recording outcomes of formative assessment and keeping these records updated and stored safely for confidential to comport to the LLUK standards. Domain A. Keep accurate records which contribute to organizational procedures. This will be in turn give learners a clear guidance as to what aspect of performance they shall still need to work on. A view of the Data Protection Act of 1998, I must keep all records within confidential agreements to comply with organizational policies and procedures and also to comply with the LLUK standard Domain A, the need for confidentiality, respect and trust in communicating with others about learner. Summative assessment will take place at the end of the learning. Giving feedback on learning achievements may be qualification, tests or completed individual learning plan. In relation to ambiguous summative assessment will represent a formal summing up of the learner's achievement on completion of a particular piece of work. This may be a completion of each unit. I will be responsible for making a final judgment on the whole of a unit after making a series of formative assessments. This also must be recorded as device to represent the learner's competence at the time of the summative assessment. A teacher has a role of an evaluator as well. It is my responsibility to make an assessment of or to judge what I have delivered. Evaluation will help me to look back at how delivered the learning and find out what could be done differently. I will need to evaluate my own practice on a regular basis, such as my opinions on the course and how it could be made better next time. Learners must be given the opportunity to evaluate the course, whether they achieve something, were the teaching materials enough, did the course meet individual learners' needs. This will help to improve the liber and subsequent sessions. In my role as NBQ tutor assessor, I may need to follow the established structure in place. That means I need to be observed actually assessing and giving feedback, and then I will be given feedback on how I perform and how I could improve. Some of the ways of getting feedback on my assessment and teaching skills could be asking an experienced colleague to observe me, get feedback formal and informal from learners on different types of assessments I use and how this can be improved. This can also be done by writing reflections to explore and evaluate the different ways I assess, using information from colleagues and learners, as well as the actual experiences and results related to the assessments I use with learners. Reflective practice will enhance good practice and further improve what I do in my subject area. All this is in line with the LLUK standard Domain E, the role of feedback in effective evaluation and improvement of own assessment skills. Revising is about making change based on the evaluation information and will be enable continuous improvements to be made. I am responsible for making any changes to the assessment or teaching methods that were not effective to the learners in order to meet their needs. This can be linked to Domain E, the role of feedback in effective evaluation and improvement of own assessment skills. A teacher is a researcher. I should take responsibility to engage in continuing professional development to inform my practice, as this is one of the codes of professional practice. As a teacher, I need to do a lot of research by reading relevant books, using the internet, journals, attending training, and other relevant sources to update my knowledge. I am responsible for attending standardization meetings to inform my practice and to work in line with the specified standards. I must take it upon myself to explore and keep my mind focused to get knowledge and understanding. Collaborating with others would help me to improve my own and team performance. This is in relation to the LLUK standards in Domain A. Ways to reflect, evaluate, and use research to develop own practice and to share good practice with others. There are boundaries within professional disciplines. Teachers are not supposed to borrow money from learners. Either are they allowed to lend money to learners. It would be unprofessional for a teacher to be found in such a situation. Teachers are also reminded not to go beyond their role by going to learner's home for assessment or learner coming to teacher's home for assessment. All assessments must be take place at the center or a workplace. As a teacher, I must always follow organizational procedures in dealing with issues such as complaints and appeals and make reference appropriately, especially where the issue is not within my competence.